and now I have the honor to start again the activity concerning this conference about the role of women in peace building, and we had already have interesting discussions about the role of women in strengthening the rights, and now we'll certainly have another interesting discussion about the role of religious leaders and how women are involved in peace building. At the beginning, I would like to welcome Amal Jalal Mohammed, Deputy Minister of Tourism in the Kurdistan region of Iraq, who will be together with us to talk about the strengthening of women's rights by religious leaders. Perhaps Mrs. Amal is with us now. Welcome, Mrs. Amal. And the sound, is it? Yeah, is available. Please, it's your turn. It's your floor. Welcome. I greet you all. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. At the beginning, I deeply thank the organizers of this valuable conference, which gathers representatives of Parliament and of the women organizations to talk about peace. For me, it is important not only to talk about participation, but also to talk about who has lost their lives, and also to mention which grave violations of human rights are experienced in this country. In general, this has to be discussed not only on these platforms, but on a general basis, that it really enters the thinking of people. The Iraqi society and the Kurdistan society needs urgently to draw attention to the lives of women and the challenges of this life in this society. And of course, this is a task of the political parties, especially which have political and religious names, and that they really are working for human rights, especially women's rights, and especially also to use the cultural resources available, and especially also through the draft law for civil status. And in the Iraqi society, we see that there are still shocks and clashes in our society concerning or due to traditions and to traditional life, which is women are affected by. There's still these stereotype imposed on women, and of course also international organizations refer to this and to try to deal with this, especially also with the implications for children, in order to overcome the negative aspects of that in the society. In 2001, in 1950, the rights of children were internationally recognized, and but now, young girls are suffering from injustice, and the United Nations have also referred to the difference between religious texts and the real situation, and the international texts refer to this and criticize that there are no real measures against this, and that there's still no real and efficient activity to overcome this. For example, to fight torture and violence against women and other crimes and acts against women by the central government or government. But in Kurdistan, we have now started to pass a law against racial discrimination, and we are working on setting up institutions for women who fight against violence against women and so on, and other measures, and more and more in more and more areas. And of course, they must be also suitable for this, and women have to take their role in the political system. Also, the political parties should accept this, and also the clerics who play an important role in the society, and also by their prayers and speeches. And human rights generally, and women and children's rights especially, should also be taken into consideration. Also, the parliamentary groups should have to take this into consideration, and also the parties and religious leaders, in order to guarantee security for this society, for families, for women. And it is important for the religions that they really fight for human rights in general and women's rights in particular, and that they are in basic part for the implementation of Resolution 1325. At the end, I wish this work every success, and in the service of people, first of all of women. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Amal. We come back to you in the discussion, and after we have heard the other speakers, to ask questions. And we have now with us Father Raed Adel from the Syriac Catholic Church in Mosul, who will also speak to us about his role and the role of the Church in defending women in building up peace. Welcome. Do you hear me? Yes, we hear you. We hear you. First of all, I would like to thank for giving me the chance to take part in this important meeting about the role of women in the Iraqi society. And I have heard Mrs. Amal, and she has spoken very excellently. And concerning the role of women and the strengthening of women's rights by religious leaders. Of course, here is the problem. The problem is in the intervention of religion. And in the Oriental societies, religion has a strong role in most political and life and social areas. Whether this is positive or negative, this is not our subject here to discuss, but I must say that there are interferences that should not be there. Our society and this masculine and patriarchic society includes many obstacles for the role of women. Unfortunately, in the Eastern societies, the position, the stereotypes of women, and men are basically not convinced of the role of women. He wants to control, who wants to be the basis, who wants to have the last word, and this is also in their thinking and in their religion. And here lies the problem. There must be a thinking, a different thinking, which Mrs. Amel, my colleague, has already mentioned when she talked about this subject. In our society, women are marginalized, and the women themselves, in many cases, they don't want to rely on themselves. They want to stay passive. They often say, we can't do anything without men, husband, brother, son or father. I'm not able to organize my life without a man. I can't do anything without men. And here lies the problem. So in our Eastern societies, they are not convinced of this.
Are all the speakers there?
هل يكون كل المتحدثين معكم؟
عفوا الصوت واضح؟
Sound is good? Yes, yes it is. I'm a very practical person, and I would like to give you some examples from Mosul itself concerning the lack of the women's role. If a woman dies in our society, we have such a table where the names of the descendants are mentioned and at what time. If a woman dies, her name is not mentioned there. She is given only there as the spouse or woman of a certain person, that her name is not mentioned. And of course, name is an expression of the personality of person, and whose name is not mentioned is forgotten, and is only considered an annex to men. Another example from Mosul or in general in Iraq, if there's a group of girls and they would like to go out for a party or a restaurant, a cafe, then people say their morale is not good, their behavior is not good, and they ask, where are the fathers or brothers of those girls, or where is her husband? Is this because of jealousy or but it is, they don't want to see girls without a male accompanying person, and it's not allowed that a woman go to a restaurant by themselves on their own. And but the problem is often connected to the men, and the Oriental man. For him, it is possible that he kills a woman, or that he takes her life when he thinks that she has violated his honor. So we need a big change, a fundamental change of the view of the society to the situation of women. But this is only possible when women are convinced that about their role and that they have to do something, because the bigger role is on women, not on men or on clerics. We are so far the first, we have the same, but women have to raise their voices. They should organize conferences and fundamental changes, revolutionary changes of the society. because our current society is a male, masculine society. And so they should really organize such meetings, the revolutionary change and fundamental change of legislation in order to safeguard, to strengthen women's rights. This is urgently needed in our society. So we also need legal amendments. We need the change of the position and the point of view of religions, and in order to have an integrated and all-embracing justice for women in our society. Because they form half of the society, and their role shouldn't be the role of a minor. And so I really, again, congratulated to this very valuable conference in the support for women in our society and their rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Ra'ed Adel. We're going to get back to you with some of the questions later on. I'd like to remind the audience that you can send in the questions to the speakers through the email questions.elbarlament.org. Now we're going to listen to Pascal Echouard, the former Minister for Migration and Displacement and the head of the Hammurabi Human Rights Organization. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, please. Go on. Ladies and gentlemen, dear audience, dear members of the Parliament organization, all listeners and viewers from all over the world. Welcome and thank you to all of you. The Iraqi women have seen a huge presence in different societal areas, even though there have been numerous obstacles. And also given that there is also a very tribal culture which is deeply enrooted in the society, which do not respect the worth of and the value of women and considers them missing something. And they are also exposed to a kind of discrimination simply because they are females. And I'd like to applaud what Father Ra'ed has just mentioned, which has already preempted some of the things I've written down here. I'd like to confirm on my own behalf and also on behalf of the human rights organization I represent that the silence of Iraqi women is over now. This time is over. And Iraqi women want to stand beside their men and the other half of the society, and also inherit, which is not only something for the rights of women, but for the society as a whole, and men first and foremost, because reinforcing the role of women is also something that is for the benefit of men themselves, and is also beneficial for the society as a whole. This also plays a huge role in human rights. The Iraq wants to be part of the international community where there's no place for our means of the deprivation and the violation of any rights of men or women alike. And for 2 days ago, on the occasion of the 70th anniversary of the announcement of the International Declaration, or Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we mentioned also that all humans are equal in rights. The tribals and the popular institutions are the first ones demanded to use the positive side of their influence, and that influential persons such as the leaders of tribes and those who represent them, and I'm going to call upon also the religious leaders to respect fully the status and the rights of women and to protect their dignity, such as is stated in the Iraqi constitution in Article 14, that they're fully equal before the law. Through this communication, and through this widespread belief that women are missing because they are not fully respected human beings. And I would like to agree with what Father Raed said. I live it here daily in Baghdad. What he mentioned is that when someone dies, the wife is never mentioned. The wife is only counted under the header of her husband, which she is considered to belong to. The religious leaders are extremely important in the process of change of the patriarchal and masculine way of thinking in the culture of society, because the public culture is very much based on religious beliefs and principles. And that's simply the case because the voice of religious leaders is very widely heard in the popular circus. And this should go along with the dignity of human beings and also with the principles of our religious laws, which also guarantee the basic human rights, also within the liberty of religious practice and freedom. So human beings, men and women, they should not be targeted on all the levels of religious laws. They are going to be applied on both sexes. So there's the question of dignity of human life, regardless of the belonging to a certain sex or a certain religious or belief. So each human being and women alike should participate as far as possible, and they should behave towards others as others behave to them. So and we should also consider that freedom does not mean chaos. In addition to responsibilities in the household, women are generally considered a tool in the hands of men for the proliferation and the bringing forth of progeny, and particularly in agricultural sectors. And when educating women might also lead to strengthening the status of women, but that needs awareness raising also to prevent an aggressive and violent behavior to women. So this kind of very harsh behavior towards women should be deeply revised. So we could arrive at a society which is open to others and where we can build a democracy to invest in even deeper the spirit of responsibility for women, regardless of what the religious side is relating to here. Maybe religious leaders are not the only ones, but they also have certain tasks towards strengthening the role of women in the civil field, in incorporating them in different activities in education. For example, in the churches in certain positions, which is particularly referring to the Christian confessions. And we see more women now taking over tasks which are important in the society, but that is usually limited to service provision and educational posts. And they have not yet reached decision-making position. That's why we'd like to see cooperation with these very important institutions in society, so they can incorporate women in their broader civil programs to correct what is possible to correct and to give them their rights. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Pascal Ward, I'm head of Hammurabi Human Rights Organization and former Minister of Migration and Displacement. What I've just presented to you was just a draft version of a speech which is not finished yet, I'd like to point out. Thank you very much. Now we'll like to ask Syed Saleh Al-Hakim, head of the Hikma Center for Dialogue and Cooperation, for his intervention. Can you hear me clearly? Is the sound there? Can you hear me clearly? Can you hear my voice?
سيد صالح.
Sayyid Saleh Al-Hakim. Yes, right?
في عنا مشكلة.
We have a technical issue here.
بسبب المشكلة التقنية رح
Due to technical issues, we are going to ask Magdid Karim Taha first, Professor of Islamic Sciences at Salahuddin University, to take the floor to provide his intervention. Said Magdid, are you with us? We are aware of the fact that internet use poses some technical issues, so please excuse us for that. Welcome. Best greetings to all the audience and to the organization elbarlament from Germany and to all those who are undertaking and directing this very important conference and also very sensitive issue. Peace be upon you and upon Muhammad and all his followers. We as Muslims and me as a researcher in Islamic affairs, we greet this honorable conference, which is interested in women, in particular women's issues in the Middle East. I'd like to congratulate you on this occasion of this excellent opportunity and like to greet my colleagues present with me here at the conference. Yes, women have a preeminent role in the legislation of Islam, and they play a role in building up society as well as in very essential areas of life. That's why our Prophet, peace be upon him, said that women are sisters of the men. That mean it so that the mankind is built of two kinds. So humankind is not complete if there is only men, but women have to be present as well. So women are the completing mankind as well as men. So they are half and half. So that's why we'd have to give the space to women so they can contribute to economic affairs and political affairs and important areas of life and administrative issues. And so we can reach the best outcomes. Women are really excellent, particularly in administration and education and other areas, just as men. There's no difference between them. And particularly given that we in the Middle East, and more particularly in Iraq, we were facing a terrorist attack by ISIS, so-called ISIS, particularly our brothers and sisters. Women were facing greater suffering, so that the society would have to open its arms widely to these women who had to fall victims to this inhuman attack, and that they can offer to them administrative opportunities and education possibilities and so on and so forth. Even in the commercial life, so women can have an efficient and proactive role. And I would like to point out to religious leaderships who have a say in the tribes that they have to accept, based on the recommendation of our blessed Prophet, who said, please take good care of women and have them have their role and leave them their space and give them their full rights so they can participate alongside men in all fields, in administration, in politics, in labor and the job market, and particularly in education. I'd like to greet you once more, all the audience. Yes, women and Iraqi women particularly in the Middle East overall have not yet received the opportunity which has been given and granted to other women in Europe and the West and elsewhere. We, as an Islamic nation, respect the other religions, such as the Christianity and others, and we respect women fully, and they have the right to join us in all the fields of life, so they can serve their country side by side with men, so that the human task in this life can be accomplished.
Thank you very much for this intervention. And now we listen to Karim Suleiman, Supreme Advisor to the Yazidi spiritual leader in Iraq. Please, the floor is open for you, and I would like to listen from you concerning the women's rights and the religious view. Thank you very much at the beginning for this invitation, and thank you also to the organizers of this conference. And what has so far been done in the program. There's a long list of speakers, and there's also a long row of speakers. Oh, sorry, I didn't want that you come late, but we would like to hear from you as a personality, that you are together with us and that you talk to us. This is very important for us. Greetings to our sisters and colleagues in this dialogue and our brothers. I think that the societies, backward societies, do always see, have a certain picture about their position and the future in comparison with the developed society. And this also includes women. Women in Iraq or in Kurdistan, in the region of Kurdistan in general, they are suffering from many plights. And of course, there's discrimination against women. And we hope that women in our society will get their rights and that they get a bigger share in our societies. And there's a fact that in our society and in similar societies, there are steps on the right way. And but women have to continue their life. They have to do what they have to do in order to guarantee their lives as human beings. And of course, this is in line with what is existent in the religions in general, that everything should be done for women. But unfortunately, theory is one side and practice is the other side. Although there are so many good principles in the religions, but these has sometimes not avoided the discrimination of women. And of course, there are also tribal traditions and customs. And so I think that the religious leaders, religious activists, that they take part in helping women to guarantee their rights, whether they are clerics or they are active in religion, or that there's more awareness for this, and that they are more proactive, and to overcome some of the stereotypes which are still existing in our society concerning women, and so to give them the chance to have a better life. Of course, this is necessary, but in my position as the Supreme Advisor for the Yazidi spiritual leader, I must also say that as long as women are suppressed in Iraq and Kurdistan, not only once but twice, especially Yazidi women, they have dozens of plights to suffer from, and who live with them in the neighboring societies. They have also responsibility. And in 2014, these women witnessed brutal violence against them and acts against them which are far away from any human behavior, and no religion does really accept these practices because they are they are against religious principles. When, for example, rape is committed, or they are in a barbaric and in a very bad way they are dealt with. What happened in Sinjar. But we should also refer to the fact that Yazidi leaders, the previous Amir and the current Amir, and that they always had an honorable and historic position, and they always tried to introduce many acts and many measures to protect women from rape and from violence. And then they were brought back to their homes. This has also happened, and we hope that we are now in the beginning of new steps taken by the society of our country to make a more bright picture of the future, and that these societies really guarantees the rights of the women. And this very briefly what I wanted to say to this conference and to this discussion panel concerning women. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Karim, thank you very much for this contribution to the discussion. And now, Mr. Karim, Professor of Islamic Science. Thank you very much. When we talk about the acts against women, and we are also very grateful for this conference. And we want that women live in peace and in welfare. And we know that Iraqi women have shown a lot of resilience. Now we celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Security Council Resolution 1325. And this also calls for respect to women. This is not only an opportunity to discuss what women and women's affairs have of importance, and what women do for their lives. And when I talk about the Iraqi women and their affairs especially, we should also take into account that since the foundation of the Iraqi state to this date, women have always been suffering from tribal and institutional suppression, and sometimes they were derived of their simplest rights, and especially also under the dictatorship in Iraq. And then we came to the former system. There were conflicts before 2003, and then women suffered at that time from these wars and from losses they had to witness. But women, despite of these plights, they were able, also in the time of defeat, they were able to take part in this fight. And then we had the time of division. Then this affected the whole society, not only women. And when we had to fight for our daily bread, this was especially affecting women. And when even the simplest things were not available, and when the whole society was then was weak in education, in knowledge, and in every other area. And the Democrats and the Islamists who used the slogans of democracy and Islam, they manipulated this for the sake of political Islam and for their political goals. And under these conditions, we don't have a solution. And women have nobody who helps them. The only thing is social integration. In our Iraqi society, we really have to want to bring this society together. And this is necessary for our Iraqi people, that and this was done when we encountered ISIS and when we defended our country, and also in many other aspects by the institution of the civil society, also religious institutions which stood at the side of the people. There's no doubt that that political Islam has weakened the positive role of religious institutions in a country where people usually respect religion and its institutions. But when this is undermined, religions like Sunni, Shia, and the Christian religion, and so on. One should not mix religion and politics. We also should work in our field of specialization and responsibility, and on the basis of the words of our authorities. And we should do this in our social and cultural institutions. And the holy places in Najaf and Karbala and so on took part to help women to alleviate their sufferings. And there's a video which shows also some activities of the Abbasi and Husseini friends. But we have two problems. In addition to the neglect seitens the government concerning the society, we also see that everything which is religious is backward, is also backward. And of course, there are mistakes made by religious institutions, but there are also positive steps. And we have another extremism in our country, which is political Islam, which is backward and which is not really conscious. And but What we also see and note now about the situation in Iraq, and which is very regretful, is that the secular and the Islami activities are on the descent, and this, of course, has negative effects. And we, as religious institutions and dialogue institutions in Najaf and in Ashraf, we are ready to cooperate with others and to take part in any project which serves Iraqi families and to foster the spirit of family. Iraqi families are influenced by men, but women play an important role there, and this should be developed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Saleh Al-Hakim. Maybe we might ask some questions to you, because we are holding this discussion to focus on the role which might be played by religious leaders everywhere in Iraq. Maybe we can go back first to Amal and ask a question about positive experiences you have observed through your presence in this issue, and how religious leaders can push things forward in this regard. Thank you to the participants and all the other speakers for their valuable input. Based on my experience with the honorable religious representatives in the ministry here in the Kurdistan region, even working with organizations such as the Hikmah Center, and also on the broader national level. And on the theoretical side, we don't have a problem, but on the practical level, we observe that there is exactly the opposite happening of what is being said, and all these nice speeches and preach in the mosques. For example, there is a religious responsible who is the head of the Ministry of Religious Affairs, who has a very good point of view. But under the head of the religious parties, political parties, we see a group of personalities who publish something on behalf of religious leaders on social media, on YouTube, a group of instructions which are not fitting the respect to women. And that's where we are hoping and striving that it is in theory, this point of view, this is being distributed. And that should be an essential part in peace building, and to stop the phenomenon of violence in tradition, and to change stereotypes which have been inherited about the status of women. For example, the Jafari law, which has violated the rights of children before it was mature. So who sent it to the Iraqi parliament? Who supported it? Who killed the politicians who worked on these issues? Well, what we are striving for and what we ask religious leaders and political factions who are supporting them in the political parties, that they stop all kinds of violence and they stand firmly against all kinds of violence, and that they stop these very vehement violation of human rights. We want to protect women from all kinds of violence through this war. It's been 3 years now that we have been discussing this in the Iraqi parliament. In the Kurdistan region, the biggest challenge or the biggest obstacle is the civil status law, where we have the possibility to have a second or third or even fourth husband. We are trying to stop this through the law. But the Kurdish government is saying that this is in existence in other regions. And so women would need a number of organizations and fair and just legislation. Also, women's shelters for protection of vulnerable women. So on the theoretical level, we do not have a problem, but when it comes to practical implementation, we have a problem. On steps are extremely slow, or we do not see any serious steps undertaken in this regard. Father Ra'id Adil, I have a question to what the Church has done for women survivors of ISIS violence. Maybe questions which will come up for discussion. What was done by religious leaders for those survivors so they may experience rehabilitation and reintegration into society? In fact, as a church, we as Christians, they have also been Christian survivors. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. So they have not done much for the Yazidis because we as Christians, we were ourselves IDPs and we used to live in camps and in caravans and so on and so forth. So we are in the same situation such as the Yazidis. But that is not our subject here to know. In fact, if we want to see today a bigger role for women and her rights realized, men have, and particularly religious leaders and tribal leaders, should have to leave the space, and they should not have the last word. Because, concisely put, if as a man, I want to be as I am, I'm everything, I control everything, why should I give someone else or the woman a role or a place? I am saying and I'm repeating what I've said. Women have to ask for their rights. They should not take their rights from someone else, or particularly from men. Dear Father, if you allow me to ask you, we are now discussing the issue that we want to promote the contribution of women because she is asking for it. That's part of the questions that is being posed to you. And she's asking for her rights. Because we are talking about the role of religious leaders, in particular, for example, the church. What is your role in promoting this? You're saying that women have to ask for this, and men have to step back. But there are many men supporting, religious leaders supporting the role of women. What are religious leaders in Christian church doing, and what is different? In the Holy Gospel, there's something that says, is the idea clear? So that a tree who brings forth a certain kind of fruit, something which is not good, so we cannot take from this tree good fruits and be good. So what can I provide as a religious leader, as a Christian religious leader? I can only give something to the women theories. Women, if they take on their role and they have a revolution, then I'll be the first one to give her rights. Otherwise, nothing. I cannot give her the role if she does not request it. The problem in our Oriental society is that women have become convinced by their role and they have limited themselves to this. Before this conference, in fact, I've been participating in a number of meetings which have been discussing the same subject, and there were women. And when we were discussing, and I said what I've just said, they have criticized me. Why, how can you do that? Men are the basic principle. My husband is not helping me, and so on and so forth. So how can I take my rights if I am myself not convinced? So I'm repeating what I've already said. Women have to take their rights into their own hands. Religious leaders, tribal leaders, men in general, I'm not going to give them in general anything. I'm not going to give them the roles because they are. Why should I give the responsibility to someone else? I am the one responsible. Thank you very much.
Perhaps the question is also posed now concerning, on the basis of previous questions and of the answer of Father Raed. Oh, sorry, this is, boy, the sound is very bad now. How can the victims and survivors of ISIS can be supported? And what is the role of religions and religious leaders to alleviate this suffering and to improve the situation of women in the society? In fact, the religious institution is the spiritual council of the Yazidis. Yes, we hear you. Yes. The special religious institution of the Yazidis from the beginning, when this attack against the Yazidis started in 2014, they did always try to protect the women and children. And in effect, what I mentioned before, there were principles in the Yazidi religion which cannot be put aside. But there was a fatwa by the Yazidi authorities to support them and to welcome these victims of the attack. But the question was, how can we help Yazidi women who are abducted? How can Yazidi institutions help them? So the state, maybe the legislation, the executive institutions, they have a role in our country, in Iraq, in Kurdistan. These are pillars, and our duty as a religious institution, we have come forward with a lot of statements and communiques, and we always called for the support of those women who are suffering from that. And so this exists in the Iraqi parliament to discuss the situation of Iraqi surviving women and so on. But unfortunately, usually things cause only very, very slow steps. And so it is possible, it is very difficult to do anything now. And we can do this only with the West, with the states like Germany, France, and so on, and that we have agreements with them. For example, it was agreed that many of the victims were sent to these countries for treatment, for mental treatment and physical treatment, in order to give them the chance to continue their lives and to meet their dignity, their needs of dignity. This is what we can for the Yazidi women. In addition, of course, to other things, it is correct that this conference today, this is the celebration of a very important anniversary, that the rights of women have been really declared by international organizations. But the situation of women, wherever it is, and especially in Iraq and in the region of Kurdistan, is that we have a lot of stereotypes still in these societies, which deprive women of their freedoms and of their rights. It is necessary that we accommodate the money, that we start real steps in order to save the women. And my question is, what happens concerning the authorities for religious things, for religious affairs in Iraq? It is really possible that clerics in mosques, in churches, in other places of religious, that why don't they demand really compensation and equal rights for women? And this also is also a role of the Ministry of Education. Why don't you really work out programs for the correct education, proper education of women? Another point is media. We often see that there are many programs where women are really not dealt in the proper way. So I think that especially religious institutions should do more for equal rights for women in order to guarantee these rights everywhere in the world, but especially in Iraq and in Kurdistan. Thank you very much for these words. And now we go to Mr. Mardid. What can be done by religious leaders, also by tribal leaders, and by organizations of the civil society in order to develop laws and legislation further for the protection of women? Is there any sound? This mute. Maybe your micro is mute. Is on mute. No, no. Now, do you hear me? Yes, now it's better. Certainly, the call for meetings and the dialogue concerning religious institutions, which was made by our colleague, Yazidi colleague, and also by others. We, as a religious institution, and especially the religious institutions, whether Islamic or Christian or Yazidi or other religions, we are closely interconnected and agree that this is a human cause, and especially a Iraqi cause. And we, of course, especially because we have witnessed a lot of oppression and suppression by terrorist groups. We have a lot of tribal problems. We have to come more together to form one unity, and I do not agree with the situation that we should shift everything to legislation, but we are should be a country of equality and where the different religious confessions live together as one Iraqi people, and that we are able to build up systems, comprehensive systems, all-embracing systems, and we are still realize that we have not yet developed an efficient federal government. So the Iraqis cannot get all their rights. So we, as an Iraqi people, we are not. In fact, we are, for one side, of course, we are quite different, and we are. There's a great diversity. We have Arabs, we have Kurds, we have Turkmens, we have Syrians, and Muslims, and Yazidis, and Christian Khaikais, and others. That means wide variety and of different periods of time also. And but if we want to have peace in our country, we as religious institutions, as Islamic institutions, we should come together in order to also in the religious foundations, so in order to say that we want to live together and how we can live together. And when we talk about the Yazidis, we have also collected aid for them, and this is good. That we also talk to our brothers and sisters from the Yazidis, and that we express our respect for them, and on this basis we were able to help them and our Christian brothers in TV channels. We have also said that we have to re-establish this great Iraq, and that we leave behind us the religious and confessional thinking and the division in the society, and so we come to the best situation. And of course there are many lacks in the laws with regard to humanity and so on. And Iraq now lives in a lot of plight and many lack and deficiencies. This cannot be denied, but our Iraqi people, when it unites and when we build a new civilization and culture, a strong culture, then our brothers in the Shia in Iraq, in the center and in the south, and before the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, before the fall of the system, it happened with them. What happened there, and what was also mentioned by our colleague, political Islam, and so in many this term political Islam is often misused, but we are one religion, and it is a strong religion, and our women are respected, and we should help them and support them in order to address them also with the respectful language. And so the basis of this, the basis of unification and of coming together, and the hope for peace, and also for mutual respect. This is important, and religious institutions are able to serve our country, our people, and our sisters and brothers more and more. I do not agree with any opinion which says that only law will give us everything. Of course, we want to be a democratic country. We want to have a state of law. But I would also like to say that law and state cannot fulfill all the duties and tasks. Religious institutions have a role, and I think, of course, I support legislation and also values which are connected to this. Mr. Pascal.
Pascal, regarding on the background of what has been said by your colleagues of the other speakers, there's a question from GIZ. And at the same time, I'd like to ask you or all the other speakers that you can give us, if there is such a thing, if you know something about a positive experience, an initiative which has occurred, something concrete, palpable, which has happened on empowering women and reaching equality between the sexes and preventing violence against women. This act or this plan or this initiative from the religious leaders, if you have such examples, maybe that might add something more positive, a positive input to the general bleak picture. Thank you very much. I'd say it's something we can easily speak about. We daily hear speeches, and many others have a sincere wish and will to do something, just as the others present here. They really want to change society. But on the ground, in fact, it's really difficult to do something. From positive examples, there are quite a bit of them. I would like to point out to a fatwa issued by Rouhani, which is something very positive, in fact, and laudable, particularly regarding the rights of Yazidi women and survivors. It has had a huge impact on Yazidi women and Christian women survivors. We were afraid that there would be no possibility for Yazidis to receive this kind of forgiveness and grace from the spiritual leader at this very high level. But thanks God, there was this understanding between the society and different institutions and also the Yazidi community itself, that there need to be a realistic humanitarian solution and a real decision which is built on reality, not only nice speeches, wishes. Most of the time, everybody wants something, and there's the will. But when it comes down to reality on the ground, it needs to be simplified, and for simple reasons. For example, the parliament needs to be involved regarding the issue of domestic violence and also the issue of political Islam. And then what we hear is speeches such as, oh, we can't do this because it said so and so in Islamic law. And we've had enough of this short-sightedness. And then they are damaging religion with this. That's political will. There are politicians who are using and exploiting religion, and they are really the core of the problem, at the heart of the very problem. The politicians, they only want to stay in power, come what may. So we see them competing personalities from different parties, be they Christian or Muslim, they have become used to taking off everything which is constructive for society, and they're only running after what is going to assure them remaining in their posts and positions. We have many examples. Unfortunately, Raed had to leave us. But on the Christian side, for Christian women, it has been very difficult and very sensible issue, because there was no the Christian church has done a lot of things, but there's, for example, we've cooperated with our Hammurabi human rights organization. We have been able to provide them some basic material livelihoods. We have enabled them to change their place of residence based on their needs and wishes, but it was something very little. Many stories in society, but success stories have something to do with the decisions which are going to be taken. For example, the law against domestic violence is going to solve this and is going to incorporate this woman who is half of the society and include her in building a new society. Law is not going to accept that we're going to build and this has all going to come back under the control of the state. But the state cannot do everything in detail. And that's why the organizations and women's organizations are first and foremost in charge of advancing and doing things, which is not simple, of course, particularly in the political sphere. But they if they feel that there is something within the competence of women, they will try to take it away. So they will marginalize women clearly and justify this with political reasoning. I think it's something very thorny, because many things are being said and very little is being done on the issue of decision-making. Thank you very much. Sayyid Saleh Al-Hakim. How can religious leaders help overcome societal and political obstacles towards the greater participation and involvement of women also in all areas of societal and political life? You also have a question, which I'm going to add to this question to you from Aya. Are the reasons of Iraqi women's problems due to political or to cultural reasons? Maybe generally speaking, how can we address this issue? How can we solve this? Thank you for giving me the opportunity once again. Warmest greetings to Warda, Mrs. Warda, which I respect fully, and to all the other participants, honorable members of this panel. It's very clear from what they've said that they're very loyal and they're very serious, but it's only theoretical speaking. Basically, we have two problems in Iraq. On the one hand, on the level of the state, it is the problem that the state itself is very weak. And on the other hand, there is a weakness within the population that they're not asking enough for their rights. So not asking for their rights, as such has been mentioned by Father Raed and others here, women should request their rights. The role of religious institutions is extremely important because they have an enormous impact on Iraqi society. I'm not negating the efforts of religious institutions, but I think that they could take over a greater role to contribute in cultivating and raising awareness the society of their rights. If women request their rights, the others are going to stand beside them. So what we need is now women are treated unjustly in Iraq. After the toppling of the regime, the laws and the passing of laws and the implementation of laws has been weak. And women and civil society organizations would have to set up the plan. We're going to support and help with the plan which is going to be put forward by women. I do not see that women have a clear plan for work and for action so they can do advocacy for their rights. They have to start the initiative, and then we will follow and we will help and support them. We as a religious institution, there are risks which are around us as an organization. 3 main risks I would like to mention. A risk in a society where religion, now the connection was cut. There is a two-sided sword. Religious leaders might either be a help for society. Religious leaders might also be a cause of failure if they follow their lowly intentions. So that's why we as a society, such as has been pointed out by others here, the religious legislations being used by politicians is doing injustice to women, because they're not sincere personalities, because also religious personalities have their own goals and interests. Religion is being politicized, and it's being used for the best interest of gaining and retaining power and authority. And that's in Iraq as well the case for legislators in the parliament who... Well, sorry, the connection is being cut. So the feeling, the religious leaders feel that they own the facts and the full truth, and that they do not. So these are the risks, the 3 risks which we are facing here. Even though I note certain positive points in religious institutions in Iraq, be it the Shia, the general Shiite highest authority in Najaf in the world, or the role it plays in confronting ISIS and public points of view and standpoints. So there is some positive sides in the religious institutions in Iraq, Shia, Muslim, Sunnah, and so on and so forth. But what is generally to be said is that there's no intersection, but we have found in Iraq a continuing cooperation with other institutions. We, as a Shiite institution, have, for example, always stood with Sunnite institution. For example, we've set up in Baghdad the Rouhani House, where we meet from time to time, all of us as religious leaders. We have a common council. So this cooperation is a given fact. And the reasons for the divergences and the differences is not to be seen and to be searched for within the religious institutions. And that's something very positive in Iraq. And the other positive thing in our religious institutions is that they're capable of criticism. And they always ask others to correct them. And if they see that there's something better, they will follow. In religious institutions, they have this spirit of cooperation and complementarity in Iraq. And to a very large extent, we have a big hope in society and also in civil society organizations. We have a lot of hope in our colleagues in other organizations, also in Germany, for example. They contribute to further the good of society. We have becoming used in Iraq and desperate towards what politicians are doing. So we would like to cooperate within society on our basic issues as far as we can. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Amel, to what extent and in which way can religious leaders address the rights of women in the different denominations? And of course, there's the readiness. There's also agreement that it is necessary to unite, to be complementary. But to what extent is it possible for religious leaders to make this a reality, especially also in cities, but also in the countryside? Frankly said, the question of the role of religion is important. It is all used. There are people who use it to their own interest and the benefit, and especially in the Islam society, and the Islamic Sharia is then used for this purpose, or even in Kurdistan. But we have another problem, or a big obstacle, a big challenge. This is the speaking in the name of religion, and then the formation of militias and of groups in the name of religion, and in order to be or to deter others. And so here comes in the role of religious institutions and of legislative institutions and so on, to show people what are their national, cultural, social and economic rights. And of course that we need also religion, that we need the formation of institutions which support us in this work. But I would also like to say that I see on a daily basis that we have listened to a lot of theories and of nice words, but in practice such instructions, such a thing is not then put into practice. And it is, for us, it is necessary that we live in a safe environment. And how can we secure our life, our political activities? How can we bring women into the labor market? How can we give a promising life to women? And of course, we have not enough institutions which are doing this, which are doing something really and particularly for the women's rights. The Iraqi women are deprived of their economic and of life rights, and even in religion and politics and so on, and especially in remote areas, in rural areas. Women have no idea about their rights. Only in the social life they know they have to marry, they have to deliver children and so on. But their social possibilities are limited, and their position is also seen in a wrong way. And so it is necessary that women have really the right that they come forward with their own projects in order to do this in the practical life. And it is important that in Iraq also members of the parliament and of the government take part in these processes. But so far, this is very limited against the background of the situation of the Iraqi society. When we speak about the women's rights, we speak about women's rights in general, not about an elite or a special special group or about participants in political processes. But what we want is that every woman, every girl in Iraq can really guarantee their own rights from the farthest frontiers of Iraq and up to the center. And so we also expect from the ulama, by their fatwas and so on, that they are proactive in supporting the society, in pursuing the rights of women, and not only by law, but also outside of law, that groups are formed which have also come forward with ideas, with instructions, with information, and this, of course, supported by government and the religious institutions and of the civil society also, in order to have really a serious approach to this subject and to make the society practicing these rights in real life. And this also includes the amendment modification of the civil status law that, for example, men are no longer allowed to discipline their wives and so. And of course, looking at these deficiencies, we should really take a strong and a serious position concerning the law of civil status, to give women really safe places and shelters. And for this, of course, we need instructions, we need decisions, and we need stronger institutions. Thank you very much, Mr. or Father Raed Adel. What is the role of the religious institution in the development of these laws, like civil status law or law on domestic violence? Especially, you represent a minority in Iraq, but we know that a minority may be 5 million or only 300,000, but we know in Iraq minorities are not small in terms of the number. And how can your institutions, how can you become active in these fields, also in cooperation with other religions? Can you please open your microphone? It looks as if your microphone is mute. We don't hear your voice. No, not yet. No, unfortunately, we don't hear you.
Is the sound from his side?
هذا الصوت من جانبه.
يفتح أيقونة.
Perhaps we have technical issues here on the internet in the connection. Oh, so please, Mr. Salah. I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that religious institutions, although they have a good standing in Iraq, they should concentrate on religious speech of the language. We have a very old culture and the religious culture in Iraq, and you should know that there are programs for the training of religious leaders leaders, but this is not sufficient to serve the current society. We need now also a renewal of the religious addresses, Muslim, Christian, or Yazidi or others. Father Raed, are you now with us? Can we please, now we hear you. Now the floor is yours. In fact, the Iraqi society and the Iraqi law happens according to the course of the state and the Islam laws, and so religious denomination and the religious belief is so that we have our demands to the government, to the parliament, and that they take our Christian position into account. But usually they rely on Islamic laws, and in many cases it is just refused to consider this. They say we have the Islamic Sharia, and this is the basis of Iraqi legislation. And perhaps we will still have to raise these demands in the future as well as women have to raise their demands for their rights. We don't have a dictatorship in our country. But we have the principle of equality, of the diversity of civilized societies, which are good and which are valuable and which should respect each other and live in dignity with each other. And so in our society, we want to have a good society for everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Karim, the situation in Iraq in general for women and women of minorities. Do you think that working on education or dissemination of new concepts for the new generation in order to change stereotypes or the concepts of minorities, equal rights, and so on? Do you think that there is also a role of the religious institutions in order to exert influence on the other sides, especially to raise the awareness of women and girls concerning women's rights? Yes, I think the question of education and training is very important. And always I remember what was said by the Japanese emperor when he came to power in Japan, and he said that we should also focus on the teacher, and because they are possible to change everything in the society. The education process does not last too long. It is only 6 years to the middle school or so, or even then we have 4 years at the university and so on. These years are not too long. Perhaps there can also be some education programs which are open for knowledge, for equality in general. This could also bring about good results in our country. In the country like Iraq, also in the region of Kurdistan, this can have a good influence. Also, the religious institutions may have a good impact on this, on the Muslims, Christians, Yazidis, and all the denominations in our society. If there were some programs, if there's curricula which also support and educate in the spirit of coexistence, of peace, of knowledge, in order to overcome old and backward ideas. This would really help to develop our society, and it would be a good chance also for women to develop positively. But in all these cases, these words of my sisters and words, this is, of course, more or less, it is enlightening, but they are still theories. But we as scientists, as scholars, we should also, as long as we do not develop such programs, we can't change the society. And please allow me for some minutes to say that on these occasions, I should also use this chance to thank the organizers of this dialogue. And I would like to our Yazidi friends that we do not forget that our Shia, Sunnah, Christian and other friends, all components of the Iraqi society, Kurds, Arabs, and the denominations, Turkmens, and so on, that we should not forget our solidarity position after this plight, after mass murder that we have witnessed in 2014. And Yazidi women, I think it is very important to say that, especially on this occasion of this conference, we should express our support for them. And we should also say that we want that Yazidi women really develop again out of the sand there, and that we'll have model women as fighters and politicians in general, and especially also Yazidi women. That the Yazidi women, they have really become symbols, and in all European parliaments in the United States, and there the voice of such suppressed women has been raised. And what here, for example, Nadia Murad, she is very known. She has also the Nobel Prize and got the Nobel Prize, and she has raised the awareness of many in the world about their situation. Also, Vian Dakhil, who is a member of the Iraqi parliament, when we had were witnessing these sufferings. And so we shouldn't be pessimistic. And in fact, the situation of women, whether it is in Iraq or in Kurdistan, and we realize now that this is still difficult, but we see that the women today, their participation is stronger in the political life, in the other fields and areas of life. Sorry, at this time.
We, as a Yazidi religious institution, always think the countries who had solidarity with us, particularly Germany and France, and who developed programs. And thanks to these programs, now the women and the girls who have been kidnapped and were held hostage by ISIS can now live in these countries and in their societies thanks to this developed country. So we'd hope that women are no longer forced to leave their countries to live somewhere else, but we'd rather hope they can live among their families, in their communities, in their culture, so we can build a safe society. I'd like to ask Pascal about this. How can we improve the security situation for women and the safety of women in Iraq? The safety and security of women is part of the safety and security of the entire society, anywhere. in Iraq, you have sometimes not the feeling that you can feel safe or not. But women within their families, they would have to have safety and security in their daily environment. Amal already mentioned how the situation in rural areas is. Of course, we are on a daily basis in touch with women in rural areas and in the cities, and it has not remained hidden that the struggle of women has not ended, but the struggle of women in itself cannot be an alternative for decisions regarding her dignity and their respect and their liberty. Be it in a mosque or in a church, the preachers need to dedicate some time to this issue, and they need to give her space. Or without women, what can you reach and achieve in this life? Nothing much. So it's not only about nominating a certain group in the rural area here and there, such as Father Wright has mentioned. Without women, we cannot live. Of course, without men, women cannot live, and the other way around, of course. So that's the general rule of law. It's a basic principle. But our Father, let me confirm to you that women are not silent. They're speaking up. The struggle is ongoing. And if we have achieved now certain rights, that's thanks to women and their struggle regarding the quota in the parliament. But if a woman is now in the parliament, it is only thanks to the quota system now. And if it's mentioned in Article 1 and 2, that's only something that's been said by political parties. It's a very huge issue. As Syed Saleh has mentioned, with all my gratitude to what he mentioned, what we have a problem in the discourse, in the principles themselves, we have to change this discourse and this rhetoric towards what is requested by life today and not 200 years ago. And it needs to be a very focused and targeted discourse addressed at the community, because women have to open up and supple the societies more, because it's very harsh so far. The woman has to support society and get it out of the culture of violence. Thank you very much. Madid, Karim Taha, there is a question too. Has there been any change to the official religious discourse over the course of the last few years in facing the extremist rhetorics? And also, maybe I'd like to add another question. When women are demanding their rights, sometimes there's a mix-up of requesting their rights and them being exposed to, that they're saying that they're exposed to violence, or that they're threatened or directly killed, or that there is defamation campaigns. What is the role of religion to face these things and to confront them? And also the role of social media channels in this. Thank you very much. In fact, as we see, the religious discourse, yes, has changed very much towards the better, because we in the Middle East, or even in general in the Islamic world, and in Iraq in particular, we have seen that after what happened, the wave of extremism, which has basically destroyed everything, some of the religious leaders, the preachers in the mosque, have changed and revised some of their ideas, because they have understood that this violence or this despotism And this injustice to rights does not serve Islam and does not serve the humankind. And extremism or exaggeration is unacceptable in all instances and in all religions. And that is why, thanks to God, thanks to the laudable efforts here in the Kurdistan region in the Religious Affairs Ministry, we have opened courses, awareness-raising courses, religious trainings, particularly for preachers who are confronted with people who and have to talk to the general population about religious issues and administrative issues. So thanks God, there is a real change in the political discourse, such as already mentioned Sayyid Saleh. Yes, in fact, we all, as Muslims, as Christians, as Yazidis and Kaka'in, all religions, we have to move on from the fixed bases of our religions, so we go on and continue and keep pace with the changes of our time. There are changes. We have in all religions things which are fixed forever and things which need to change and are changing constantly. So we have the basic fixed principles, so the Word of God and so on and so forth, and other fixed things. And then there are things which change based on what is going on in our time and what is needed in our time. So this is what we need to do so we can bring together others and also so we can serve our people and our nation all without this racist discrimination or religious or confessionalist discrimination. Regarding the second part of your question regarding women's rights, yes, women have been subject to a lot of violence and injustices from those who do not understand religious affairs correctly. The Islamic affairs and the other religions were founded for serving mankind, and women are part of mankind. So humankind is not complete without the element of women. Prophet, blessed be he, said that women and men are brothers and sisters. So one half is men and the other half is women. So we have to stand firmly against all questions of violence, and we have to refuse it completely, be it against women or against environment, against anything. Because violence is never beneficial. Dialogue is the alternative option, so we can come together and we can serve everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you. Maybe the last question, very briefly, to Sayyid Saleh Al-Hakim regarding the refusal of the extremist discourse and particularly using of social media channels, be it in refusing stereotypes about women or also the impact of religious discourse to distribute further the influence of women's activists. So it's not only attacking women, it's also men which are subject to this. Maybe briefly, within less than a minute, if it's possible. Of course, it's a very broad subject, but maybe you can give us your point of view on this subject in 2 words. The intervention and the interference of politics in the religion brought about all bad things. So take them apart from each other. So in all the holy books, it is said that we have respected and dignified human beings. So the political exploitation of religion is what has brought us to this point. But with all the problems we are having, we have not yet lost hope that we have women, excellent women. Amal, or the other lady present here with us, we have women, ladies, which give us hope. And we have friends all over the world which give us hope because they're our friends now. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and to all the speakers, men and women alike, who have given us their input, and also those who have asked questions from the audience. It was a very interesting discussion, particularly that it has gathered different parties and sides. We do not need to agree upon everything, but we need a real discourse about fostering the role of women in building peace and achieving her rights. Amal Jalal Mohammed, Deputy Minister of Tourism in Kurdistan region of Iraq. Thank you, Father Ra'ed Adel from the Syriac Catholic Church in Mosul. Karim Suleiman, Supreme Advisor to the Yazidis, spiritual leader in Iraq. Mardid Karim Taha, Professor of Islamic Sciences at Salah ad-Din University, and Pascal Warda, the former Minister of Migration and Displacement and the head of the Hammurabi Human Rights Organization, and Sayyid Saleh Al-Hakim, the President of Hikmah Center for Dialogue and Cooperation. Thank you very much for having been here with us, and we hope to have other opportunities to meet you in person once the pandemic is over. It was an honor for me. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you. Thank you. Thank you for your attention, for having followed this session. So we'll have a brief break for 10 minutes approximately, and then we'll be back in 10 minutes from now for the last session, where we will welcome young women activists from Iraq, and we very much hope that they can join us in 10 minutes, and you can join us. 10 minutes break, and then we'll be back.